Hello again. You're on Office Hours with the Mad Professor. My name is Liam. Today I'd like to discuss the expression, the facts don't care about your feelings. And the reason for this is it's getting quite widespread and is often used rhetorically in conversations, and it's always sort of bugged me. I'm going to do it by noting three different areas about it quickly. One, the pandering nature of the expression. Two, its relationship to emotional thinking. And three, some epistemological considerations about people who would use it versus the people it's often used on. And don't worry about that expression. I'll unpack what that means. I know epistemology is not a common word. All right, so let's start first with the pandering nature of the expression in the way it's used. First off, you have to reckon with the fact that people using this are generally refusing to engage on all issues. It comes up only in some areas, so only some facts matter, and your feelings are okay on all the other areas. That's what sort of bothers me about it. Someone will use this sort of expression to shut down conversation on a particular issue, to basically say, well, this is a fact here, and the fact doesn't care, that you're wrong, whatever. But they seem seldom to examine their own beliefs very closely. And people, intellectuals like Ben Shapiro using this expression are often writing to people who will choose not to look any deeper, and in fact often panders to them. There have been explicitly racist things placed onto the Daily Wire. Oftentimes you'll see this playing to only popular perspectives of the actual audience to that particular base, which simply feeds a confirmation bias and allows people to hold on unchallenged to the ideas that they already have. So, if the facts don't care about your feelings, where are the conservative polemics against anti-Semitism and racism? Because, let's face it, it's relatively common on that side. Plenty of conservative intellectuals are clearly not racist, and in many cases anti-racist, yet they spend no time whatsoever talking about these kind of issues. They leave that to the SJWs that they criticize. And then in criticizing them relentlessly, that allows their own base to hold on to those biases themselves. It leaves them unchallenged, right? I don't know, how about the science skepticism? You can see this a lot in, for example, the right's refusal to deal with things like climate change, or just to use a simple one, how about evolution? Evolution is a bloody fact. There's no way around it. It is absolutely incontrovertible fact, and yet it's frequently denied from the right, much, much less commonly on the left. So if the facts don't care about your feelings, what about that special feeling that lets you feel that God molded you out of clay, right? Instead of us evolving along with all the other critters on this planet. All right, second point. I want to talk about the emotion that comes in on both sides of the issues here. So I'm talking about people on left and right, liberals, conservatives, however you want to break that down. There is a lot of emotion in the bases on both sides, right? So that affects a lot of the debates. It affects a lot of the discussions. People get very passionate about things, and that often is something that comes in for criticism from people using this expression. The facts don't care about your feelings, essentially suggesting that you are thinking emotionally, I'm thinking logically. You see this especially in people who are frequently resharing Ben Shapiro videos. Ben Shapiro destroys libs with facts and logic. Big bold letters there to try and jump out at you, suggesting that the people on the other side that they're debating or challenging are not using any facts and are not using logic or reason, that they're just emotional thinkers. Well, the emotional thinking exists on both sides of that equation. Yes, there are emotional liberal thinkers. Yes, there are emotional leftist thinkers, and there are plenty of people in these rallies who do not think deeply about the issues. They hear something, it fits their own confirmation bias, and they go with it. Exactly like people on the right and people who are conservative. There's no difference there at all. That's called being human. Many people get caught up in things. So there's a distinction here between the emotional thinking that infects a lot of the bases of both sides and the intellectual core of both of them. Because the intellectual thinkers from the conservative side and the liberal side, from the right side and the left side, are usually not emotional thinkers. They're much more careful. They do have very specific considerations that they follow, particular methodology that they follow, and they are the foundations for the arguments for the people out there. Whether it's the foundation for a bunch of SJWs in the pussy hats in a march, kind of like, rallying out there after work, or the people who are rallying to, to hear Trump, or to hear, Shapiro or somebody else speak on a campus and, stick it to the libs or whatever. It doesn't really matter. Most people do not spend the time digging deeply into any given issue. Cat just jumped from the bed there. Since most people are not going to have the time, and it's not a matter of intelligence. I'm not saying intellectual in the sense that only some people are smart enough to work through these issues. No, it's simply a matter of time. Who has time to work through the different issues? Not everyone does. So you rely upon people whose ideas sort of appeal to you, right? That's simply common. Okay, so that takes us to our third point. I want to make a point here about the epistemological considerations that play into both sides of this debate. On the one hand, you can frequently see, particularly on the conservative side here, a bias towards a priori thinking. All right. Whereas frequently on the more left or liberal sides of the equation, you'll see a bias toward empirical and or skeptical thinking. The two of them kind of go together in a sense, and I'll take all three of these terms apart. So let's start with a priori thinking. Now, a priori thinking depends upon moving from a theoretical deduction and then from there into general principles. So it works things out kind of in your head. It works things out through particular theoretical models, right? It's reasoned out. And you'll also see a lot of what I'd call isolated reasoning on that side as well, which would be sort of working from within an existing mental framework, from within a particular, well, I don't know, to use a more technical term, within a particular discursive framework. You're sort of stuck within a particular model. You understand a particular way of thinking about things, and from within that system, what you've got makes perfect logical sense. It works, all right? Now, the problem with both of these, with the theoretical deduction that you see in a priori thinking, generally you will think through something carefully, right? But then you'll stop, meaning you won't test the idea empirically. It doesn't involve a lot of introduction of data to it. The data is left out. I'll give you a good example of that. The anarcho-capitalist economic model. An ANCAP is someone who wants no government, but still wants the capitalist economic system. This might work well on paper for them. They might be able to reason through it and answer any question about it and see how it works, but absolutely as soon as you introduce any real-world data, whether it's psychological data, historical data, economic data even, as soon as you introduce actual evidence to it and try to test the claims, they fall apart. Right? It simply does not hold up. So it's reasoned through, it's logically consistent, it works, but ultimately it's a priori thinking. It's purely theoretical. It does not have a real world basis. Right? So much for facts there. How about that, the isolated reasoning part of it? Give an example of that. Simply the defense of traditional values in general. If you hold to an idea because this is the way my parents did it, this is the way people have done it for a long time, and that is the actual basis for it, or for example, within a particular mythic or religious tradition, you have a certain something makes perfect sense. You can walk through it. You can see all of the logic in it. Within a particular religious tradition, things work. They are easily answered. They are easily explained. There is an answer to every possible question that you would have about it within the system. But as soon as you step outside of that system and you introduce data to it, as soon as you introduce other material, as soon as you start introducing inconvenient facts, generally they crumble. And this is not true of just a single one or anything. It's really true of all of the big ideas that we hold, all of them, right? Religious ideals, political ideologies, economic systems, they all have flaws in them that can only be seen from the outside. Right, you have to be able to stand outside of the system in order to see them at all. So, to look on the other side of that, right? Because much more commonly on the liberal and left, you'll see a bias towards empiricism and skepticism. So, what does it mean to be a skeptic? A skeptic is someone who challenges everything. Right? They don't just challenge whatever liberal idea they don't like or whatever idea they hear that just sounds bad to them. What they do is they're willing to challenge any idea. They will think through any issue, and they will pursue data on any particular one. They'll look for the information on it. You often see skeptics reading widely. They'll often read way outside of their comfort zones, and they'll compare different perspectives. They'll look for deeper information on something. So, skeptical thinking. Again, a sharp bias for the intellectual core of the liberal and left. Empiricism, right? Closely related to it, but distinct. With empiricism, what you're doing is you are adding evidence. This is where you actually look for the support to a particular idea. So, I've thought something through. I've challenged a particular idea, and I've come up with a tentative conclusion for that. I think this might make good sense. So, what do? I have to test it. This is actually the foundation of the scientific method, for example. Science does not attempt to prove ideas. This is something that conservative thinkers often completely misunderstand, right? You know, I've lost count of the number of times someone has told me that evolution is a belief, right? Just like religion is, and it's not, because it depends upon empirical evidence entirely. And as soon as one piece of empirical evidence shows up that cannot be explained by the model, poof, the model is gone. Evolution crumbles. And it's simply a fact that evolution by natural selection has stood up to every single piece of data collected in dozens of fields for 150 years. Right? That's why it is a fact. It's simply established by this point. But because it is scientific, and because of that skeptical bias that comes in as well, it is always open to challenge. And that's a key consideration. I am on something of an extreme in this model, in that in many ways I'm heavily influenced by what you can call Pyrrhonism or Pyrrhonian skepticism or suspensive judgment. But there's a broad spectrum here that actually connects to the entirety, really, of the scientific methodology, as well as tons of, again, liberal and left sort of biases in thinking in general in this intellectual core. Now, as a Pyrrhonist for myself, I take everything contingently. It appears to me now to be the case that I am standing in one of the rooms in my house. I'm standing in a part of my house, and I am talking to a video camera, intending to record a video to put online. It appears to me now to be the case that I am recording a video. But I could be wrong. I'm not likely to be wrong, because there's a considerable amount of evidence and no good reason to question that assumption. There's no good reason to. However, if someone presents me evidence that forces me to question that conclusion, if someone could start presenting evidence that showed me I was actually a brain in a jar in the year 3000 connected to something like the Matrix and plugged into this system, then I would have to consider that possibility and revise my understanding of what this means. This actually gets to a fun point I can make. People in the whole like the right Shapiro crowd type of thing often make comments about being red-pilled. It's a reference to the Matrix films. You take the red pill, it introduces you to the real world. You take the blue pill, you go back to the Matrix and go back to sleep and forget that you learned anything at all. The saddest thing about their use of that terminology is that The people most likely to use it are the most blue-pilled people, because a red-pilled person is always open to being challenged, always open to new ideas, and follows the evidence wherever it leads. So again, the facts don't care about your feelings. Right? If that is true, then you have to stay open to every possibility and read widely. You can't just read or listen to people that sound good to you. This person confirms my biases. He says things in a nice, flowery, intellectual way that already appeal to me. No, you have to go outside your comfort zones. You have to listen to people that you dislike and think through their ideas with the same consideration that you would give to something that sounds comfortable. Only there can you find the truth. Only through that kind of process can you really show that you're open to the facts themselves and not just what feels good to you. Right? So, in the end, I agree, the facts don't care about your feelings, but I would caution you to actually look for the facts and don't think that you just have them. All right, that's my discussion for the day. I'll keep it nice and short. This has been Office Hours with the Mad Professor. Again, I'm Liam. If you enjoy these things, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you again next time.